Welcome to Locana Lounge. I'm your host, Jen Campbell, Product Growth Manager here at Locana, and I'm joined today by Ty Vanden Acker, Vice President of Product Strategy here at Locana. We're here today to talk about how to streamline your field program with modern mobile mapping. Why this topic is so important right now. There's so many great modern technologies out in the world driving, supporting business, GIS being a huge one, so many ERP and work management platforms that are really supporting a lot of business. It starts to get interesting when you try to take that out to the field. We've seen a lot of different ways to try and do this out in the market. And really, it's in trying to answer things like, how do I get that great data out into the field in offline environments? And how do I scale past just department level user counts? A lot of one we hear all the time, specific use case. How do I solve for that use case? And these questions are leading to a pattern in the marketplace where what we call point solutions are coming in to try and address it. And what we mean by that is software that's designed just to solve that one problem, whether it's a use case or whether it's a certain question. And the problem that we're seeing is as these softwares come in and hyper focus like that, it leads to complexity because you need to have so many point solutions to answer all of your problems, answer all of your questions. This leads to a lot of headaches. It leads to IT complexity. It leads to heavy training in some cases, or even manual entry to the point of paperwork going back and forth. And the most compelling issue that I continue to be concerned about is the data fidelity risk that it introduces with so many different handshakes as these things are going back and forth across the organization to support that field program with such a complex set of tools. So Ty, one of the things I'm really interested to hear from you, how has Locana's team been thinking about this problem in the market, and what are some of the ways that you approach solving it?
Yeah, no, we've certainly seen that pattern and talked to a lot of CIOs, especially utilities companies, other large infrastructure providers. And they're consistently telling us we need to simplify our application portfolio. We've got vendor management costs. We've got costs to support and maintain those capabilities. We've got licensing costs. We need to simplify that, and we need to deliver a better experience to our users in the field. And so Locana really looks across the enterprise and how do we deliver a solution that will work for all of the field users in the enterprise that helps that CIO consolidate the portfolio. And then we work with their work management application of choice, and the two applications then become an enterprise solution that will take care of all of those field use cases.
So Ty, you've been in this field for decades at this point. I'm really interested if you could share your background and some of your expertise and how that helped you lead up to the solution for the industry.
Sure. I actually was running an IT department before I got into GIS, and I found GIS, and I've always loved maps, and I see the vision of what having a spatial approach to things or seeing the spatial context of things can really do for a user, for an industry, for a company as they see that whole spatial aspect of their operation. So I got into it, and at this point, I've been 20 years plus doing geospatial work and have that IT approach built into how I work. And so I really think about how do we make this a great solution for users? How do we make it a great solution from an IT perspective? I've seen over the years hundreds of RFPs, participated in them, even put out a few over the years. And there's just this amazing thing happening in the industry right now, especially around work and asset management, where you've got ArcGIS from Esri is really taking a leap, and you've got the sync-enabled feature services that go offline. You've got ArcGIS Enterprise. We're up to version 11 now. And there's just great capability there, utility network coming from Esri. And we've also got other major players. S4HANA for EAM is out, and customers are looking at taking advantage of those things. You've got Click Mobile having transformed and users ready to upgrade that. So there are all these desires to upgrade to some incredible modern platforms, and we have a real strong role in helping ensure that the geospatial component of that comes through. We see some people putting out some apparently very compelling point solutions, but they have some of the point solution problems that I know you're well aware of, Jen. And so we're really out there evangelizing this enterprise approach to field work and this world-class GIS capability that that our Lemur product brings to world-class field service products.
That's awesome. Thanks, Ty. And I know from my own background in GIS and also with ERP systems, about a decade in each of those, I have watched similar evolutions of seeing GIS grow up, seeing how the ERP systems are really getting more and more robust with supporting complex asset management and bringing that to the full spectrum of the business platform, and the magic of being able to leverage that new modern power of ERP, EAM systems with GIS is one of the most interesting, exciting developments that I've been able to see and been a part of. And so that's been my passion as well, coming to join this team in particular and starting to see that synergy of those two big pieces going out to the field and bringing all of that data, bringing all that sophistication with it, and empowering field workers in new ways to have the most relevant information at their fingertips and to be able to, in real time, collect new data and push that back to those enterprise platforms. So it's really the magic of the integration of those two pieces that inspires me and has, caught my interest to join Locana and join this team.
Yeah, thanks, Jen. And it's been great to have you and your enthusiasm and your broad ERP experience as well. Really reinforces the experience around Locana with respect to GIS capabilities and work management. It's probably worth spending a minute just to talk about what GIS is and why it's so important to have that out in the field, in the hands of field workers and infrastructure industries. Those industries, those organizations own very, very expensive assets that are spread over a very large area. And so one element is simply finding the assets, and with it on the iPad, in Lemur, or their Android device, or even their Windows device, they've got their blue dot that'll help them guide them right onto that asset. And not only can they see that asset, but they can see the other assets around it. So they see what the interdependencies are with the other assets, how those things are connected. And that gives them a much broader operating picture to understand what it is they're doing. A lot of people also don't recognize that GIS is actually much more than just drawing and the graphic of the map. It's actually got all kinds of asset characteristics behind it. So they can tap on a pipe and find out that it's a 2 inches steel coated pipe or something like that, and get the details that go way beyond just where it is, so that they know exactly what they're looking for, what they're going to work on, what materials they might need to go work on it. And then you alluded to this earlier, that ability in the field to actually collect the information about assets that they're installing, or record the work that they've done spatially, or mark up and sketch where there are problems, where there's defects. You take a damage assessment kind of a scenario post-storm and mark those things, what's going on out there geospatially, and then communicate all that information directly and digitally back to the GIS department so that they can standardize that and get it into the production data very quickly. So it really is important to get that GIS data, which is system of record stuff, out into the hands of field users so they can use that along with the work information that they're supposed to be doing. And I want to talk just for a minute about how people are trying to solve those problems. We mentioned point solutions a little bit earlier, and some of the struggles as we get to more and more point solutions, and the challenges that presents, not only to IT departments, but really to users who may have to learn multiple applications, right?
That's right.
But our work management friends, some have tried to integrate GIS right into their application. The reality is that GIS is hard. It's harder than anybody thinks. I have a computer science degree. I think of everything as an API. It should be easy. There's just a lot to know about GIS, and how you model the shape of the earth can completely change where everything appears to be. And it's just one of those things you've got to know. So our friends that do those work management apps, it works great when you're looking for an address. but when you get into GIS and especially when you try to do it offline, it just really struggles. That's a challenging problem to solve because of the volume of data, and a handful of other things. On the other end of the spectrum, you've got GIS companies who maybe underappreciate the complexity of work management, especially work management in emergency situations in infrastructure companies. And let's just say they put GIS-centric applications out there that just fall short in terms of their capabilities with respect to work management, especially for regulated industries like utilities. And then, of course, you've got point solutions in between that are really narrowly focused on making one use case work really well, and with varying degrees of success. But then those come with those other challenges that we've already talked about in terms of what that means to the IT department.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that on all the cases you're talking about, Ty, with work management, trying GIS trying work management, ERP, and with the point solutions, each one of those really introduces new problems for the business. Because, yeah, I mean, we know that you start to imagine all those things intertwined together and it's like IT headache. So we know that's frustrating for the IT group. But when we talk about the business problems of all these things, what does it mean when work management tries GIS and falls short? Well, you have people out there that are making doing spatial guesswork, or doing manual data entry that's related to spatial data, where I've seen personally people writing stuff on paper, which then gets handed back to some person in the office that's supposed to manually put that back into the system of record. So that kind of stuff it adds up. And then similarly with the GIS, when it tries the work management stuff, then you're doing, like another type of manual data entry back into the work management platform. So both sides, you have that translation of, and maybe you get around with spreadsheets and CSVs or whatever, but it's still manual entry. And not to mention that a lot of time when the GIS side tries that work management piece, there's heavy training involved. I mean, I think one thing that we've both lived and breathed is that the complexity of the GIS comes through a lot of times with the tool sets. And so you get this, app or this desktop thing that's like just tons and tons and tons of tools. And if you don't kind of know the GIS world, it's hard to interpret what all that means. So it bubbles up as inefficiencies for workers, as people, making mistakes because they don't know the software, or data that's either way behind, way out of date because you're doing paperwork, or there's data risk introduced, which I think is another piece that for me I've mentioned this so many times. Each one of those handshakes that's introduced by all these different back and forths is a data fidelity risk. It's a potential point of failure. And I mean, you've told me, Ty, that you've seen some organizations with 50 different apps on their iPad. And so when you multiply that by the thousands of transactions going through each particular one, it gets up to tens of thousands of data fidelity risks. And to me, that's one of the most overlooked concerns that the industry solutions have brought to businesses in asset intense fields, and it's like it's not being addressed well, and it's big, and we just need to make sure that, hence our, what part of why I'm so energized about the solution that the Lemur team has put together around this enterprise approach. So what this has really led us at the Locana team to understand and really embrace and go after is this idea of modern mobile mapping that takes exactly what we're saying, the best of work management, the best of what's available with the ERP systems, and combine that with the best of what's available in GIS, and taking that out to the field and doing this in a way that can solve virtually all use cases, and that can solve many different any company that's in an asset intense field. So this ideal solution needs to be easy to use. It needs to be really focused on reducing that data handshake risk, as well as making sure that, again, those best features of the platforms that you already have available. I mean, I think this is one of the key pieces here, is that these ERP systems already exist. The GIS systems exist. So, and a lot of these ERP systems do have a field app that can blend together with a GIS field app and enable you to work with, again, the best of both of those platforms and having all the GIS functionality out in the field that is easy to use. It's tuned to specific use cases while being able to support virtually all use cases and working offline. So really, as our team has been thinking through this, we've been keeping those ideals, that broader perspective of what the market really needs to solve the root problem here. So Ty, this is where I'm really hoping to hear more about how Lemur specifically is doing this.
Yeah, that's great, Jen. Thank you. And I'll pick up maybe where you left off with that interconnectivity. And we haven't talked a lot about how Lemur and the field service application link together, but that's a key piece of usability for folks in the field, is to see that as one experience. And so we've worked really hard, and we've worked with the product teams at our partner companies on the other side to make sure that those integrations are as tight as possible, and that we create a very seamless workflow for that user in the field that still gives them all of their best-in-class field service capability and their best-in-class GIS capability to go together. And then we make all those things work offline. And I've seen this trend lately. People are kind of piling on to offline. Sure, we work offline. And so it's gotten me a little bit frustrated because we have a different standard, I think, at Locana for what offline means. I coined the silly term offline awesome a few years ago. I don't use it too much. I'm a little embarrassed to use it, but I needed some way to differentiate between what I feel like some people are claiming. Well, it doesn't crash when you go into airplane mode, so it works offline. And we just have a different standard for that. We believe that things need to work offline. They need to have the same workflows, whether they're online or offline. And it needs to be consistent for users because those users, especially again within utilities, infrastructure industries, oil and gas pipelines, they're out in the middle of nowhere and they can't just run back to coverage. Sometimes coverage is a couple hours away, or it's dangerous to get to coverage at any given point. So offline capability is really important. And it's not just awesome for those times when you're out of coverage. It's awesome every day because you've got the data on the device. There's no more my imagery is tiling in or anything like that. It's just there, and you zoom and you pan and it's there and it's there and it's there, and you don't waste time. And users just tell us how much they love having the data there and how fast and responsive the application is. So that was kind of a cool surprise to us, actually, or an added benefit once we got into this a little ways. And then the last thing is ease of use. And we've talked about that a little bit, but we're putting really powerful GIS capabilities in the hands of people who don't know what ArcGIS is, and they haven't studied mapping, and they don't know what a projection is, and they don't know that there's different models for the shape of the earth and that it's not round, right? It's not spherical. And so we're putting like really powerful tools in their hands, and we, rather than dumb it down and make them not powerful, we tried to really tune those to make it do exactly what they need to do and guide them into the workflow and help them to record the data that they're best able to record, and leave some of the more complex stuff to the people in the office that are going to get it later before it gets pushed into the production data sets. So that's our overall ethos about how we ought to be doing field service, how we ought to be doing GIS in the field. And you talked a lot about this, Jen, and so I won't belabor it, but we are applying that to use cases across the board. And I'll just use a few utilities use cases. We've got multiple customers that are using Lemur in their field service application to do vegetation management. We've got others that are doing leak survey. So you got oil, you got gas, we've got electric. We've got others that are using it to do short cycle maintenance and repair kind of work and record the work that they're doing, to get out there and see the context and help them find the right assets. They're some in the northern part of the country where buried assets are really hard to find because they're not only buried under dirt, but the cover is buried under a foot of ice. And knowing where to chip through the ice to find the valve cover is really important. And so we help them to improve from the field the locations of those things. So the next time they go back there, their hole is going to be this big around instead of 10 feet around to try and go find that that valve cover, for example. So all sorts of things that we're doing there, different use cases that we're helping them with. And it's really awesome to see that enterprise vision come together where they're using one tool set, one set of IT support team. You can repurpose technicians so much more easily because they already have the applications, they're licensed for them. They just need a different configuration of it and they're ready to go and they're working on something different. So that's really been a fantastic thing as we've gotten out and seen lots of customers implementing this and gotten feedback from real users in the field and tuned the product to really support their needs and make it easy to learn.
Thanks, Ty, for all that great intel. I appreciate so much some of the specifics around the use cases there, because it's really, those types of little details that set apart what it means for that enterprise approach and bringing real true GIS out to the field and empowering people in a way that is digestible for their knowledge base. It lets the field teams stay focused on their job and not have to become IT experts to navigate some complex tool set. So I think that's a really, really nice summary about all those different pieces, both with the tool sets themselves and with some of the specific use cases. And I know that, we're pretty excited as Lemur continues to grow and get a bigger user base. More and more use cases are coming online with Lemur. We're defining some best practices around what each of those look like, and all of those things will continue to share out with different audiences to make sure, so that everyone can start to see how Lemur really does address virtually all use cases and how its flexibility can be tuned into those individual needs. So I think that's definitely one of the powerful points of Lemur as a solution. So just as a summary, key point that I continue to bring home, the Lemur, by taking the enterprise approach, by thinking about the holistic vision of what the right answer is for modern mobile mapping out in the field, how to best leverage both of those major platforms you already have in place. This tool really comes through on all of those promises, and it solves so many of the business problems that we've talked about with heavy training, with these data handshakes that can really amplify over time, as well as some of the manual data entry that has to go in with the point solutions and different options out there. So thank you so much, Ty. As a follow-up, please do check out our product page, locana.co /Lemur, to learn more about the Lemur product itself, or find us on LinkedIn anytime. And yeah, reach out with questions. We're happy to answer. Thanks
Awesome.
for joining.
Thanks, Jen. It's great talking.